between the sessions. All right, so here we go. First panel is Nathaniel, Madhav, and Claire. I introduced them earlier. But what I'd like to do is give each of them the floor to kind of weave the story together that we've planned for today. And Nathaniel, you're up top because you're going to go first. And Nathaniel's going to be our sort of case study for the first panel. The small company doing great things for the environment and sustainability. Had access to IP, so research and technology enabled. Working on public funding through a variety of means, and also looking for direct investment from angel investors and funds and things like that. So then you can picture how the rest of the panel is going to go. Madhav Acharya is with ARPA-E, kind of representing that public side of things in terms of money and resources that startups might need along the way to get kind of started in the science de-risking point of view. And then Claire Broido-Johnson is going to come in with the fund money. She's a VC. She's the manager of the Maryland Momentum Fund. So that's going to be the story we weave. So we have our startup test case. We have our public resources through ARPA-E and the federal government. And then we have our, it's not exactly private money, but it's the VC money for Claire to talk about that. So Nathaniel, why don't you start and just give us kind of a 2 to 3 minute overview, who you are, what True Algae is all about in all of that. And then I'm going to adjust my blinds while you're speaking because the sun's in a new position and it's blinding me. So go ahead for 2 or 3 minutes and then we'll move to the next speaker.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Dave, for the introduction. We are True Algae. We are delighted to be the test case, as it were, for this panel. We've done, just to give us a little bit of background, we're an algae production company. You can see our plant in the background is based in Dover, Florida. We basically have the intellectual property of motive production technology for vertical photobioreactor, which you see behind me, for producing high quality algae. Our initial market is we produce a very high quality liquid soil amendment, but we also are looking for different ways to monetize our algae through chicken feed, fish feed, nutraceuticals, other ways to tap into all the promise that algae has as a market. We've been in operation for about 3 years, and we've done most of our funding through kind of subsequent rounds of funding. To date, we've raised roughly $3 million, but we started, of course, at the friends and family round, and that enabled us to set up a small 0.5 metric ton plant in Florida. Although I have to say we're based in the DC area, but our initial production facilities are in the state of Florida. We started with that 0.5 ton plant just as a test facility. We're able to sell to a number of small and medium-sized berry farms in the Florida market. With that, we were able to raise another round through various different angels, and that enabled us to build out 7X to a 3.5 ton facility. With that, we were able to start servicing the California market, which was a real breakthrough for us. And at that point, we were able to raise another round of funding through larger angel groups, including PEDC, which we'd love to give a shout out to because they've been so supportive all along. And we were subsequently able to build this platform you can see directly behind me, which is a 36 metric ton facility. So today I'd be more than happy to answer any questions in the breakout section about realistic timeframes for raising funds, how we go about networking, how we found angels to work with. We've also worked with a number of different angel platforms, which we've loaded our information into, and happy to talk about valuation or different types of investment vehicles like convertible notes. We've gone through all of those, so more than happy to talk to anybody in the breakout room about those types of questions.
Great, fantastic. Thank you, Nathaniel. And we'll do some of that Q&A and dialoguing here, and anything we don't get to that people have very specific questions that they want to hear about. They'll definitely have the opportunity to grill you on those things. Hopefully it's not like our due diligence we did. You can ask Nathaniel us questions
Sure.
in the
More
breakout
than
room.
happy to answer.
All right. And yes, full disclosure, I think I participated in the last check in your friends and family, and then we've done
Right.
2 more checks through the PEDC Angel Group. So full disclosure there. So I'd like to go next to Madhav. So thinking about these small energy, you are RPE, so you're more energy specific. But thinking about what do you look for, well, let's get your introduction done first. So why don't you give us 2 or 3 minutes about kind of your role and what's priorities at RPE these days?
Sure. So can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, sounds fine.
So yeah, I've been at, first, thanks for the opportunity to be on this panel. I've been at RPE, this is now the start of my 5th year. So my background is, I'm a PhD chemical engineer. I spent about 17 years in the oil and gas sector, focused on technology development and deployment. And at RPE, I've been spending most of my time supporting projects looking at industrial processes as well as low carbon materials. And just a little bit of background on RPE, if you're not familiar with us, we're an agency within the Department of Energy. And we are now in our 12th year. And what makes us unique within DOE is that we're specifically tasked with funding transformative technologies in the energy space. So anything that has an impact on how energy is generated, how it's stored, how it's used, and also the emissions that go along with that are within our scope. And we're somewhat unique within DOE because if you go back to Lynn's presentation, she showed the budget and sort of talked about all of the money that's allocated for different projects. With RPE, it works a little differently because we have a single budget that's given to the agency. And it's left up to the program directors at the agency to come up with the programs under which the funding will be awarded. So every year we have anywhere from 6 to 8 new programs that are developed, and each program has a very specific theme, which could be increasing the efficiency of cement production, for example, or lowering the emissions from methane. And within these programs, we fund a number of teams with early stage proof of concepts and take them to the point where they can then go on and raise additional money from venture capitalists or from other government agencies and continue to grow. So my role at RPE is as a technology to market advisor, and that function was specifically put in because we wanted to make sure that from the very start, we had teams that were focused on getting their ideas into the marketplace. So helping teams with a business plan, helping them with customer identification, techno-economic analysis, IP filing. All of those activities are done as part of a typical project. So that's a little bit, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on at RPE. It's hard to point to any specific new direction because we have such a broad range of activities. One thing I will mention, which I can talk about more in the breakout, is every 3 years we have an open call for proposals where any idea, and I mean literally any idea in the energy space is welcome. And 2021 happens to be one of those years. So if I would encourage folks to go to our website and check it out. It's called Open 2021. And there'll be more information about that coming out hopefully in the next few weeks to months.
Well, that's fantastic. And I saw when we were dialoguing, emailing for this program, the Open 21 solicitation that's coming up. That's awesome. I mean, that's a really rare opportunity for basically any energy related technology to get into RPE because that doesn't happen very often from I know. So fantastic. And we'll come back to some more of that too. So, all right, so we're teeing you up, Claire. Come on off mute. So we had Nathaniel, who's the small company, and we have RPE as sort of the, I usually think of it as kind of science, almost early stage engineering, de-risking. Then comes the, as they say, the gas on the fire from the VC. And I know you're early stage in that, gas on the fire, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you're working on at Momentum Fund.
Hey, super. Thank you, Dave, for having me today. And thank you to the PEDC for organizing. I appreciate it. My name's Claire Brito Johnson. I've been in the clean energy space since the mid-90s. Right now, what I'm working on is I manage a $10 million fund for the University System of Maryland. So it's pretty specific. And unfortunately, we can't invest in Nathaniel's company because he does not have an affiliation with the university system. But I have done lots of things across my career. I've worked at Enron and Constellation. I'm a founder of Sun Edison. I spent a couple years at the Department of Energy, was responsible for deploying about 11 billion of the stimulus package during 09-10 era Recovery Act. I have spent around 8 years helping to build early stage startups around the country and now run this fund. What I really like to do is help early stage companies with their business development and their operations and finance and fundraising. So for the purposes of this conversation, I'm happy to answer any questions, but in terms of what I'm looking for from early stage startups is I'm looking for market traction. So what can you do to prove to me that you have a product or service that someone is willing to buy, right? And so I am actually industry agnostic at the Maryland Momentum Fund. So I'm looking at life sciences and aquaculture and education technology and all sorts of things. So market traction is defined differently in different industries, but certainly in the clean energy and sort of the climate change space, do you have a product or service that someone wants to purchase, and are people purchasing it? Do you have a channel to market by which to sell said product or service? So that's one of the really key. Another criteria is the management team. You're investing in the jockey, right? And is the jockey somebody that's worth investing in, and is he or she coachable? I say that with all due respect. I look at lots of professors, companies, and all sorts of different types of people's companies. And some CEOs are truly not coachable. They believe that their technology is fantastic no matter what. And if they're not somebody that is willing to listen to feedback, it's not somebody I want to invest in. So I also really feel strongly that somebody needs to be able to give an elevator pitch quickly and clearly. And if they're not able to give an elevator pitch quickly and clearly, it's probably not a company that I want to invest in either. So I've looked at hundreds of companies. I've been doing this for about a year and a half, and we typically invest $250,000 to $500,000 in these early stage startups. You do have to have some sort of affiliation with the university system, and I'll put in the chat room our website to learn more information. I guess I would also add, just for the purposes of this conversation, I've been an angel investor in this space for a really long time, and I personally invest my own money in a lot of early stage startups. So I've seen a lot over the years and happy to answer any questions. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciate that. So we kind of have the backdrop for this life cycle of a company, startup, IP, tech enabled, getting into the federal government or government funding and processes, and then onto the VC. And Claire, I think you give a really great, just really clear, succinct intro to what a VC looks for. You got to prove that somebody wants the thing that you're doing, right? So I'm going to tie that back to Nathaniel and kind of come through this cycle here. So Nathaniel, there's always like resources that are needed for the company, right? It's money, it's lab space, and it's this and that. But when you get down to it, you got to kind of build something that somebody's going to want, right? Exactly. So just tell me a little bit about what you guys have done along the way to use the money that you've raised to kind of hit that because I always think about, when we're angel investing through PEDC, what's the money going to be used for? It's going to be used to hit a milestone, right? So can you just kind of, elaborate a little bit on, the money that you've brought in, what you've used it for, and maybe a little bit around how you kind of proved that it's going to be something that somebody's going to want to buy at some point.
Exactly. So, we looked at the kind of the lean market development cycle. So we took our initial friends and family money and built, well, first of all, we found a partner in Florida, Sweet Life Farms, which enabled us to build a small prototype plant, a 0.5 metric ton plant that cost us roughly about $80,000 to get off the ground. And what we did is we started with doing tests with 3 or 4 different farms, and we were able to show over one cycle of strawberries, that they were able to increase their productivity by roughly 20 to 30%. With that, Sweet Life became an investor in us, and they invested $200,000 in us, which we cycled back into the company and just increased our productivity by 7x. We went to a 3.5 ton facility. which we then, just expanded to sell to more farms in Florida. We recognize that the largest, fruit and berry market, which is our initial market niche, was in California. So we, hired somebody in California to market and essentially, knock on doors and offer our services or our product for free for those farms to test. And we got, a couple of the very largest berry farms actually to give us a trial. Those were successful as well. We were subsequently able to raise another round, which enabled us to build the plant behind us. So it was a very incremental approach, but we were always using market validation. And by the way, we also spent a fair amount of the resources on working with third-party sources to give us the data for showing the validation of our numbers. It's not just us bragging about ourselves. In fact, we always said, let's point to working the data that we got from Florida Ag Resources and Pacific Ag Research, which are two large outfits that do tests for soil amendment or fertilizer companies, and we use those data to basically get in the door.
All right. So you weren't just walking around with your shining personality and nice smile, right? It sounds like this was very data driven, very methodical, step by step, hitting milestone, land, hit the next milestone, hit the next milestone.
Absolutely. It's
all
about milestones.
Yeah. So Madhav, how does that relate then to what you guys do at ARPA-E relative to small companies that are coming in that are IP and science enabled? Like, what sort of milestones do you look for to get teams into your programs?
Good. So I guess it depends. I mean, if it's a focused program, like we have actually one called Mariner, which is around open ocean algae, like in seawater. So for each program like that, there are actually focused metrics. There are specific targets that need to be met, both technical as well as business targets. And the teams can take any approach that they want, whatever chemistry or physics or reactor design or process that they have, as long as they show that they have a way to reach or exceed those targets. In the case of open, where it's literally any idea that can come in, it's we again negotiate with each of the teams that are selected, because it's not, I mean, the title of the panel is grant financing, but what we give are not grants, but essentially cooperative research agreements, whereby ARPA-E is working alongside the team, and we are jointly, working on helping them achieve those particular technical milestones. And the goal we have is to provide milestones that will lead you to an early failure, which means that within the first 6 months, if there's a milestone and technical target that you cannot meet, we will essentially stop the project or require the team to pivot towards doing something else that has a more realistic chance of success. So it's very much a collaborative approach. I mean, if someone like Nathaniel had come to us at the start, we would have sat down and said, tell us within the first 6 months to a year, can you reach a certain throughput in your process that will point towards a cost that is acceptable to the market? And that would be the near-term milestone that a team would have to attain. So again, it depends really on the technology, depends on the stage at which some of these teams are. We have teams that come to us that are very early stage, like idea on the back of a napkin. We have some teams that come to us that have a lot of technology already developed, and in which case it's a lot easier to point them towards milestones that are closer to what the market will accept.
And so, am I right to sort of categorize the work at ARPA-E and even through to the tech to market as being more science and engineering de-risking than, but just by nature of the title tech to market, there's a certain amount of market de-risking you do too. But can you just sort of elaborate on how early can one apply to ARPA-E?
Right. So there is a sweet spot. We typically would not look to fund something that is truly in basic science, right? Where you have something that is just, you're still trying to figure out what's happening in that space and you don't really have leads. So you spend a lot of time exploring that space to understand what that lead might be. That we also, if for example, if at this stage, I'm not sure Nathaniel would necessarily want to come to us because he's already got a business and he's got funding and he's selling product commercially. There would have to be a component that says, I'm looking to do something that is still a technical challenge and I don't quite know how to do that, and therefore I would like to get funding in that space. From the market point of view, what we do at every program and with every project is we ensure that there is a strong partnership from the very beginning with the commercial and business stakeholders. So we have a program, for example, in the electric aviation space. And again, a lot of this is very far out, for the next 10 years or so, these technologies will be developed. But what we did at the very beginning is we brought in all of the companies that are interested in this space, the Airbuses, the Boeings, the folks who are doing electric mobility and electric aviation, and brought them as part of the program so that they can provide early feedback on how the technology should be developed. And it provides excellent partnering opportunities for the teams as they realize their milestones. They have people who are already familiar with what they're doing, and that makes it a lot easier. You don't have to go around to shop your idea. You have people who've sort of seen your idea develop from the very beginning. Yeah. So that's another way in which we enable the sort of path to commercialization.
All right. So you're not taking on science risk, but sort of more engineering and scale and throughput kind of risk, right?
Pretty much, yes.
All right, good. So Claire, how do you as a VC and kind of generally VCs approach kind of science, engineering throughput risk? Is that in your wheelhouse, or is that stuff you don't want to touch? And then also, if you could kind of take it the next step too, of what milestones do you want people to hit with your money?
Sure. Yeah. No, perfect. So again, it's very technology specific. So depending on, there's lots of things in climate change technology that you might be creating. You might be creating a software that helps with building management systems. You might be creating something Nathaniel's creating. You might be doing project finance for solar projects. So, I mean, it's, I do not just invest in widgets. I invest in services and products and things like that. So from a science perspective, what are we looking for? We're looking for some sort of proof, again, that somebody in the market wants it, right? And that might be SBIR funding. It might be some sort of funding that you've gotten from Madhav at ARPA-E, or some sort of proof that's showing, or articles that have been written that show what you're doing makes a lot of sense and that there's a need for it and that somebody's going to be willing to buy it. So, it's a little squishy, but it really, it's, I don't need to necessarily see revenues. It's really important before you go to a VC to figure out if the VC requires revenues or not. Most VCs require some form of revenues, or they need some sort of milestone hit. If they're a life sciences company, they need to make sure you've got an SBIR phase 1 and phase 3, and that you've got an STTR grants, or that you've got some sort of, partnership with NIH, if you're a therapeutic sort of thing. Similar stuff in the climate change space, right? So, who are your channel partners? Do you have people who are willing to vouch for you and say, like, this technology is sound, it makes a lot of sense? To answer the second part of your question about what milestones need to be hit.
Or what milestones do you want companies to hit with your money? So in terms of,
Yeah. So, I mean, it really, again, depends on when we invest. So we invest anywhere from pre-seed, pre-revenue, all the way up to Series A. So each VC is going to be a little bit different. They should be very clear with you when you're talking to them about what they expect and require. What I typically require, again, depends on whether it's a services business or a widget or deep technology or something like that. But certainly it's creating the appropriate business development plan. It's making sure you're making the right hires. And in fact, sometimes we have conditions on our investment. We'll give you 150 grand now and 150 grand after you find a new CFO. We want to be really involved in making sure that the management team is excellent. And, also so diverse. So, we're not just talking about the founder and his or her number 2 and number 3, but numbers 4 through 10. How can you look and make sure you're thinking about diversity and inclusion when you're hiring your management team?
All right, good. All right, panelists, thank you very much. And we are dead on time. We're supposed to wrap this section up at 4:15. And so we are about to head out to our breakouts, but don't go quite yet. So I got one more slide.